They said no one ever stood up to Julian Thorne, the ruthless Manhattan heir who could destroy lives with a single word. But one night inside the Golden Skye's most exclusive dining room, a young African-American woman dared to face him. She wasn't rich, she wasn't powerful, but with nothing more than her dignity and courage, she brought the mighty to silence. That single act would change both their lives forever. The Golden Skye glowed like a jewel in the heart of Manhattan's wealthy district. Its chandeliers shimmered with soft amber light, each table draped in snow-white linen, silver cutlery gleaming against crystal glasses. The air was hushed, save for the low hum of conversation and the gentle notes of a cellist at the far end of the room. It was a place where New York's elite gathered, not just to eat, but to be seen. But tonight, the rhythm faltered. At table 7, everything stopped. "Are you completely useless or just playing dumb on purpose?" Julian Thorne's voice cut through the air like a blade. He continued his scathing assessment, accusing the trembling young waiter of incompetence and labeling the staff as trash, a low-class, filthy bunch. The entire dining room froze, accustomed to the ritual of enduring Thorne's wrath in silence. Then, soft steps broke the quiet. From the side corridor, Laila Hassan walked toward him. She was tall, her posture elegant, her dark skin glowing under the soft restaurant lights. A notepad rested neatly in her right hand, a polished wine bottle balanced effortlessly in her left. Her uniform, a white blouse tucked into a navy skirt, was spotless, pressed to perfection. Her heels clicked lightly on the polished marble floor, steady, unfaltering. She stopped at Thorne's table and bowed politely. "Good evening, sir. My name is Laila Hassan," she said, her voice even, warm, but firm. "I'll be your server tonight." Thorne turned his sharp gaze on her, his lips curling in disdain. Wonderful," he said with a bitter laugh. "They've decided to send me garbage in a prettier package. What are you supposed to be? A charity case someone scraped up from the streets?" Whispers rippled across the room, but Laila's face remained calm, her eyes unflinching. "I am your server this evening, Mr. Thorne," she said evenly. "I am here to make sure your dining experience is seamless. May I start with your preferred wine selection?" He scoffed. "You don't know what you're talking about. I've been to Napa Valley more times than you've polished those shoes." Laila gestured calmly toward the menu he had circled earlier. "You've marked the Pinot Noir, sir, but if you prefer a rich Zinfandel instead, I'd be happy to recommend the 2018 vintage from Dry Creek Valley. Its structure holds up better against a complex red meat dish than the lighter Pinot." Julian's brow rose slightly, then narrowed in suspicion. "And if you get it wrong, I'll have the manager fire you by dessert." "Yes, sir." She turned, retrieved the wine, and executed the pour with practiced grace. The 2018 Zinfandel from Dry Creek, she presented the label, aged 20 months in American oak, bold, peppery, with a dark fruit finish. It pairs especially well with the Wagyu short rib. Julian stared at her, lifted the glass, and sipped. The silence was excruciating. He swirled, swallowed, then muttered, "Not the worst." "I'm glad it's acceptable, sir. Would you like to pair it with the short rib tonight or the pan-seared scallops?" "And what do you know about Wagyu short rib?" "It's slow braised for 24 hours, sir, served meltingly tender with a smoked paprika reduction and creamy polenta. Chef recommends it with the Zinfandel." Julian was finally silent, studying her. The dining room was in shock. No one ever spoke back to him. "And what if I told you you're still sewer trash in a clean shirt?" he challenged, leaning back. Laila met his gaze. Her voice, though soft, was steel. "Then I'd say, even sewer trash can know good wine and serve it with precision." A collective gasp rippled across the hall. Julian stared, jaw tight, fingers drumming the table. Then, slowly, a faint smirk, not of malice, but of surprise, played on his lips. "I'll take the short rib." "Yes, sir, right away." She bowed, turned, and walked toward the kitchen, her steps unhurried, her dignity completely intact. The manager rushed her, pale with terror. Laila, what the hell was that? You don't understand. That's Julian Thorne. He could buy this place tomorrow and shut it down for fun. Laila met his eyes, placing her order pad down. Then maybe someone should remind him that money isn't the same as decency. The manager groaned, rubbing his temples. Please, Laila, don't turn this into a war. It already is, she replied quietly. I just didn't start it. Later that night, the restaurant was empty. Laila folded napkins with steady hands. Miguel, the veteran waiter, approached her, still awestruck. I don't know how you did it. He actually ate. He didn't scream. He didn't leave a trail of destruction. Laila straightened a glass. Because he's not a god. He's just a man who's gotten too used to silence after his insults. Next time, I want him to leave knowing I didn't flinch, not once. She walked out, shoulders squared, Julian's invisible power momentarily shaken, and an uneasy peace settling over the Golden Skye. The days following the initial confrontation unfolded like threads pulled too tightly. The staff whispered. The older waiters glanced at Laila Hassan with a mixture of awe and nervous anticipation. She was no longer just a waitress. She was the woman who had stood up to Julian Thorne, and the entire restaurant waited to see if the sky would crack open and bury them all. On the night of his second visit, Laila smoothed the folds of her apron. If he comes for anyone, she had told the veteran waiter, Miguel, let it be me. 45 sharp, the glass doors of the Golden Skye opened. The air seemed to inhale at once. Julian Thorne entered like a storm, in his midnight blue suit, his presence cutting through the room like ice. He strode to table 7 and sat, the world bending to his will. Laila walked toward him, calm and unhurried. Good evening, Mr. Thorne, she said evenly. Welcome back to the Golden Skye. Julian's sharp eyes flicked up, hawk-like. He adjusted his cufflinks. You're still here? I am. A long moment of charged silence stretched between them. Julian picked up the menu, a faint smirk playing on his lips. He hadn't expected her to stay. He hadn't expected to feel this peculiar pull toward the only person who refused to run. You didn't run, he muttered. Not everyone. Their eyes locked. It was a silent battlefield of wills. Finally, Julian tapped the menu with a single finger. The question itself was shocking to the observing staff, as Thorne never asked for advice. What do you recommend? Laila kept her voice steady, transitioning immediately into her professional armor. She suggested the bold venison loin smoked over hickory, explaining that it paired beautifully with the 2017 Cabernet Franc. If she preferred subtlety, she countered, the Arctic char with tarragon butter and a chilled Sancerre would be best. You know that off the top of your head? He pressed. Yes, sir. It's my craft. He closed the menu slowly, watching her as he made his choice. Bring me the Arctic char and the Austrian wine. A beat passed. You're not what I expected. Layla's back stiffened, but she did not turn. That's because you never looked long enough to expect anything real. The words dropped like stones, felt by everyone, seen only by him. When Laila returned with the Sancerre, she poured it with quiet precision. Julian took a slow sip. You were right, he murmured. I usually am, sir. Julian set the glass down, his eyes narrowing, testing her resolve again. I don't like being wrong. I don't enjoy being humiliated. Laila's gaze didn't falter. Neither do the people you insult, sir, but they endure it every time. His jaw tightened, but this time he did not lash out. He simply studied her like a man trying to solve a puzzle. When the Arctic char arrived, Laila placed it before him, suggesting a sip of wine before the first bite to complement the delicate flavor. He ate in silence. Finally, he set the fork down and leaned back. This restaurant, he said slowly, was better before. I wouldn't know, sir. I just arrived. Less backtalk, more obedience. I'm not here to obey, Mr. Thorne. I'm here to serve. For the first time in years, Julian Thorne laughed. It was a surprised, startled sound that escaped him before he could stop it. The staff froze. Julian reached into his wallet and placed a crisp $100 bill on the table, not just for the food, but for the honesty. "Have a good evening, sir," Laila replied, bowing slightly. What kind of man hid behind a wall that thick? She made him laugh. She survived him twice. She's different. But recognition never comes without a test. On the fourth evening after Julian's second visit, the Golden Skye was full to bursting. The chandeliers glowed golden, every table occupied by investors, politicians, and heirs who wore their arrogance like a crown. Among them, the real storm had returned. Julian Thorne was at table 7 again, but not alone. Two men in tailored suits flanked him, both executives from Thorne Group, their voices loud, their laughter sharper than knives. They drank heavily, waving off servers like pests, treating the restaurant as if it belonged to them entirely. Julian wasn't laughing with them. He sat silent, sipping his wine slowly, his eyes occasionally flicking toward her as if searching for something. When she approached, one of the executives leered, his smile ugly. "Well, well, the famous waitress." Laila's hands tightened against her tray, but her voice stayed calm. "What can I bring for you, sir?" "The same thing you brought to Thorne," the man sneered, except with a smile, a big one. The second executive snorted, elbowing Julian. "Is this the woman who talked back to you? She doesn't look like much." Laughter erupted from the table. A few nearby guests turned their heads, sensing the mounting tension. Julian said nothing. He only watched Laila. She felt the sting of the insult, the weight of all the eyes upon her. She could bow, play the obedient role, and walk away unscathed. Or she could stand firm, as she always had. Her chin lifted slightly. "Respect is part of service, sir," Laila stated, her voice clear, "but it goes both ways." The first executive's face darkened instantly. "What did you just say?" "She said, you're rude." Julian's voice cut in, low and sharp. The laughter died. The executives turned toward him, startled. Julian swirled his wineglass, his expression unreadable, radiating a sudden, controlled danger. A complete hush fell over the restaurant. The men exchanged uneasy glances, suddenly aware that the ground beneath them had irrevocably shifted. Laila's breath caught. My waitress. The words weren't mocking. They carried weight, not just possession, but a fierce, unexpected protection. The executives muttered apologies, quickly diverting to talk of business, but the damage had been done. For the rest of the meal, Laila moved like a shadow at table 7, serving quietly while tension simmered. Julian barely touched his food. He watched her instead, as though she was the only steady, honest thing in a room that was slowly spinning out of control. Later that night, after the rush had dwindled and the Golden Skye glowed softer in its midnight calm, Laila stayed behind to help clear the tables. Before she could leave, a voice echoed from the doorway. "Stay." She turned. Julian stood there, his midnight blue jacket slung over his shoulder. He looked different, less untouchable, his eyes searching rather than sharp. The staff quickly melted away, leaving them alone in the dimmed hall. Laila folded her arms across her apron. "What do you want, Mr. Thorne?" He approached slowly, each step deliberate. "You have a sharp tongue." "So I've been told." "You shouldn't use it. Not here, not with men like them." "Then who will remind them they're human if everyone stays silent?" Something flickered in his eyes, something raw, unguarded. "You think you can change men like that?" "No," Laila replied honestly, "but I can remind them they don't own the world, even if it's just for a moment." Julian exhaled, almost a soft laugh. "You're not like anyone else." "And you're not as untouchable as you pretend," she countered. His gaze locked onto hers. The silence stretched between them, heavy, suspenseful, emotional. A battlefield without weapons, yet thick with complex romance. "Do you know why I come here?" Julian asked, his voice low. "Because you like the food?" "No." His jaw tightened, the lines of exhaustion etching deeper around his mouth. "Because it's the one place where no one dares to tell me the truth except you." Laila's breath hitched. She hadn't expected the vulnerability. "You're lonely," she said softly. A man carrying wounds too deep to show. Her voice softened with a dangerous pity. "Then maybe what you need isn't obedience. Maybe it's someone who won't run when you're difficult." Something shifted in him. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the faint shadows under his eyes, the exhaustion he hid so well. "Careful, Laila," he murmured, his voice a low warning. "If you keep speaking like that, I might start to believe you." Her pulse quickened, but she didn't look away. Maybe that wouldn't be such a bad thing. For a long, charged moment, neither moved. The silence was electric, suspended between fear and possibility. Then, as if realizing he had revealed too much of the man beneath the armor, Julian straightened abruptly. His mask slid back into place, his voice cool once more. "You'll serve me again tomorrow." And with that, he turned and left. Laila stood frozen in the empty hall. She told herself it was just a job, just another demanding customer. But deep down, she knew it wasn't. Julian Thorne was a storm, and for some reason, she was no longer afraid of the rain. She was curious, and, terrifyingly, she felt a pull. The days after Julian's quiet confession unfolded like a slow, deliberate trap. He came to table 7 often, far more than before, seeking her presence even when he didn't speak. Laila worked her shifts, but his words, "Loneliness is safer than betrayal," haunted her. She saw the exhaustion now, the invisible scars that drove his cruelty. One evening, the restaurant buzzed with dignitaries. When Julian arrived, he was quieter than usual, more withdrawn, his eyes fixed on nothing. Laila approached, tray balanced carefully. "Your usual, Mr. Thorne." But he didn't answer right away. His gaze drifted up to hers, and for once, there was no mask. "Sit," he said suddenly. Her heart skipped. "Excuse me, I can't." "You can," he replied softly, his hand brushing the empty chair across from him. Against all logic, Laila lowered herself into the seat. The clatter of dishes, the murmur of laughter, it all blurred. "You're different tonight," she said carefully. "I buried someone today," he replied bluntly. "He was an old man, one of my father's advisors, loyal for decades. Then, at the end, he chose someone else." The word betrayal dripped like poison. Laila couldn't offer platitudes. She saw the profound emptiness in his gaze. "And yet you still came here?" she asked gently. Finally, his eyes lifted to hers. "Because you're the only one who doesn't lie to me?" The confession was raw, desperate, almost painful in its honesty. "I don't know if I deserve that," she admitted quietly. "Then don't deserve it," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Just keep being what you are." Before she could respond, the maitre d' appeared, stiff with panic. "Miss Laila, please, your shift." Julian's glare silenced him instantly. "She's with me." And just like that, Laila's defiance had become his tool of protection. The connection between them deepened, slower, subtler, like water wearing away at stone. It wasn't love, not yet, but a primal bond of honesty and mutual recognition. He sought her presence, she sought his truth. But danger lurked. One night, Miguel caught her arm, his tone hushed and urgent. "Be careful, Laila. Men like him, they don't keep women safe. They keep them until they're bored." "He's not like that," Laila muttered, but the warning lingered like a chill. Then, a sudden storm broke over Manhattan. Rain hammered the windows, thunder rolled, and the Golden Skye's guests fled. By midnight, the restaurant was empty, except for Laila stacking glasses and Julian sitting alone at his table, staring into the tempest. Laila approached. "You should go home." "And leave you walking alone in this weather?" His voice was sharper than usual, and Laila froze, recognizing the unfamiliar sound of worry. "You care?" she whispered. His jaw clenched. He didn't answer. He stood, shrugged off his midnight blue jacket, and draped it over her shoulders before she could protest. The heavy silk was warm, his scent clinging faintly to it, smoke, rain, and something darkly masculine she couldn't name. Her voice trembled. "Why are you doing this?" His eyes burned into hers, fierce and vulnerable all at once. "Because I don't want you broken." Her breath hitched. The storm outside raged, but in that moment, all she felt was the raging storm between them. He was dangerous, she knew it, but beneath all of it, she had found the unseen softness, the part of him that longed not for fear, but for someone who saw him. Laila, trembling in his jacket, realized with dawning terror that she was already falling into it, falling for the complexity, the darkness, the hidden vulnerability of Julian Thorne. Seasons shifted. The Golden Skye saw countless guests come and go, but Table 7 carried the memory of his gaze, the echo of words that still burned in Laila's chest. The bond between them grew roots in silence. When storms came, she wore his jacket and felt guarded. When nights grew heavy, she felt seen. In his penthouse, Julian Thorne thought of the betrayals, the blood on his family's name, and then of Laila's smile, fragile yet defiant, carrying truth like armor. For the first time, he allowed himself to wonder, maybe love was not a weakness after all. That he would survive his shadows, that she would not drown in his world. That one day they might sit across from each other, not as waitress and heir, but as two souls unafraid of the truth. Until then, they remained bound in silence, two hearts beating in the shadows of Manhattan, two lives drawn together by fate's unsteady, dangerous hand. Not the end, only the beginning. The price of visibility. Laila's defiance had earned her Julian's notice, but it had also earned her the hostile attention of his world. At the Golden Skye, the staff's awe of Laila curdled into a fearful resentment. They saw her quiet confidence as arrogance, her protection as favoritism. They waited for Julian to grow tired, knowing that when he threw her away, the fall would be catastrophic. One Friday night, while Laila was retrieving wine from the cellar, Miguel cornered her, his face drawn. "There's talk, Laila," he whispered, glancing nervously up the service stairs. "He has a fiancé, a political match. The engagement announcement is next week." Laila felt the air drain from her lungs. It wasn't love they shared, she knew that. It was truth, vulnerability, a shared, complex isolation. But the idea of him formalizing his life with someone else, someone who fit his world of power and silence, was a sudden, sharp betrayal. "That is his life, Miguel," Laila managed, her voice brittle. "I am his server." "His server doesn't wear his jacket, Laila, and his server doesn't make him laugh. Be careful. His world doesn't tolerate mistakes, especially not from outsiders." When Julian arrived that night, the knowledge sat cold and heavy in Laila's heart. He was immaculate, wearing a dark gray suit, the midnight blue reserved for private moments. His demeanor was colder, professional. He barely made eye contact. "The usual," he stated, his voice flat. Laila poured his wine, her hands steady, but her voice was strained. "A superb vintage, Mr. Thorne. It's best when paired with honesty." Julian's hand froze mid-air as he reached for the glass. His eyes finally lifted to hers, hard, guarded, and instantly recognizing her veiled accusation. You read the papers, he murmured, not a question, but a statement of disappointing fact. I heard the whispers, Laila countered, her voice low enough that it wouldn't carry. There's louder than the announcements. This is business, Julian said, his jaw flexing. A transaction. It has nothing to do with you. Everything has to do with me when you make me your confessor, she retorted, the words sharp with hurt. You come here to escape the lies, and then you punish me for knowing the truth you choose to live. He leaned back, his eyes narrowing, the old, deadly arrogance returning. You assume too much, Laila. You assume I need saving. I don't. I need control. Don't confuse your courage with importance. The exchange was a vicious cut. Julian drank his wine with deliberate haste, barely touching his meal. He left no tip, no word of appreciation, only the searing memory of his rejection. The crack in his armor had sealed over, harder and more lethal than before. The executive's trap. The chill persisted for a week. Julian did not return to the Golden Skye. Laila worked mechanically, her dignity strained by the knowledge that she had been foolish enough to believe she could reach him. Then the danger escalated from whispers to action. It was a slow Tuesday. Laila was covering the floor near the private dining suites. Executive 1, the man Julian had chastised for insulting her, suddenly appeared. He was not dining, but lingering near the bar, watching her. Laila ignored him, focusing on her duties. As she passed a blind corner near the service entrance, the executive moved with predatory speed. He stepped into her path, forcing her to halt. "So the little rat has been abandoned," Executive 1 sneered, his breath smelling of expensive liquor. "Thorne tired of his toy already? I told you you were nothing but low-class trash who belonged on the street." Laila tried to sidestep him. "If you are not a guest, sir, you need to leave. I own half this building's debt, sweetheart. I can be wherever I want." He reached out, his hand wrapping around her wrist, tight enough to bruise. "Thorne only likes the silence, but I like a woman who talks." Laila pulled back sharply. "Let go of me." "Or what?" His grip tightened. "You going to call your protector? He's too busy buying a wife." Just as panic began to bloom, a voice, icy and commanding, cut through the hallway. "If you touch her again, I will have your name removed from every boardroom in this city by sunrise." Julian Thorne stood 20 feet away, framed by the velvet shadows of the hallway. He was wearing the midnight blue suit. He hadn't entered through the front doors. He must have used a private elevator, appearing like a ghost, or a guardian angel summoned by sheer force of will. The executive's face drained of color. He instantly released Laila, stumbling back. "Julian, I was just joking. She knows. She's so—" Controlled fury, cold and lethal. "Go," Julian said, his voice quiet, flat, yet heavy with unspoken violence. "Go home. Do not return to this establishment. Do not call my name, and do not breathe the same air as this building again. Your career is over." Executive 1 stammered a broken apology and fled, his arrogant confidence shattered. Julian walked slowly toward Laila. She stood motionless, rubbing her throbbing wrist, a mix of fear and sudden, overwhelming relief making her heart pound. "Laila," he said, his voice now rough. "I am fine," she whispered, pulling her hand closer to her chest. "He touched you," Julian stated, his eyes dark with a protective rage that terrified her more than the executive's threats. "I told you, my world is dangerous, and you keep inviting the danger." Laila finally looked up, matching his intensity. "You put me here. You made me visible. You showed me a crack in the fortress, and then sealed it when the truth was too much for your fragile control." "My control is what keeps us alive," he countered, the mask finally tearing. "I was here to tell you to stop, to leave this job, leave the city. The engagement is a formality that involves billions, and it cannot be risked for a moment of honest air in a restaurant." Then why did you come through the service entrance? Laila challenged, tears stinging her eyes. If you only wanted silence, why did you save me? He stared at her, the struggle visible in his rigid posture. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face, unable to bridge the gap. Because, he confessed, the word torn from him, I cannot stand the thought of you being broken by them. They are monsters, and I am one of them. The dangerous bargain. The confession shattered the last vestiges of their professional distance. He pulled his hand back, his expression darkening with self-loathing and raw, undeniable desire. You're leaving this job, Julian decreed, his tone returning to command, but laced now with desperation. And what about you? Laila asked, quietly defiant. Who will save you from the loneliness that is safer than betrayal? Julian took a deep, shuddering breath. The dark romance they had been fighting finally consumed the space between them. I cannot be saved, he murmured, stepping dangerously close, but I can choose my damnation. He closed the final distance, his hands cupped her face, his thumb brushing away a stray tear. His gaze was a burning pledge, a dangerous contract signed in the silent hallway. Do you know what you do to me, Laila? He whispered, his voice thick with unspent emotion and dark desire. You make me forget everything I built, everything I am. Then he kissed her. It was not gentle, it was fierce, desperate, a chaotic release of weeks of tension, anger, and hidden need. It was the kiss of a king claiming his truth, a wounded man seeking solace, and a dangerous predator testing his limits. Laila kissed him back with equal desperation, pulling from him the dark comfort she had longed for. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, the weight of their impossible connection pressing down on them. You will leave here tomorrow, Julian commanded, his voice still ragged. But you will not vanish. I will move you. You will be near, Laila, in the shadows, because I need the truth you offer, and I cannot risk my fiancé finding you. We will exist in the dark, where only I know you are real. The bargain was chilling, seductive, and intensely dangerous. He offered her security and a secret life, a life where she was the mistress of his truth, but the captive of his control. A woman choosing to walk into the storm. I am not yours to own. I am only yours to share the truth with. Julian smirked, a dangerous, possessive gleam in his eye. A distinction without a difference, Laila. Now go, and pack only what you cannot live without. He watched her walk away, his hand still tingling from the pressure of her kiss. He had not only saved her from his world, he had brutally, passionately pulled her into its deepest, most dangerous secret. He was not saved, but for the first time, he was not alone. The Gilded Cage. Laila's departure from the Golden Skye was swift and silent. She left the crisp uniform behind, taking only the essentials and the heavy midnight blue jacket, which now felt less like protection and more like a uniform for her new existence. Julian did not handle the logistics himself. He delegated with lethal efficiency. She was moved into a minimalistic, high-end apartment nestled discreetly in the Upper East Side. Not a penthouse, but far above her previous life, a place designed for invisibility. It was expensive, sparse, and entirely isolating. Her first week was a study in silence. Julian's world moved in the shadows. He didn't call, he simply arrived. Always late, always after midnight, after the official obligations, the board meetings, the political dinners, the engagement planning had been fulfilled. Weary, complex, and craving the brutal honesty she provided. Their conversations were intense, complex therapy sessions disguised as pillow talk. He would vent his frustrations over corporate betrayals, family hypocrisy, and the suffocating pressure of his arranged marriage to Anya, a woman he referred to only as the contract. She understands the necessity, Julian muttered one night, staring at the ceiling, Laila's head resting on his shoulder. She knows power is transactional, but she's cold, Laila. Her ambition is a vacuum. Laila didn't offer comfort, she offered reflection. And you prefer your ambition to be a prison you chose? He turned his head to look at her, a fleeting smile, a genuine one, the rarest and most dangerous sight, crossing his lips. See, that's why you're here. You don't mend the bars, you just point out the illusion of freedom. Desperate, charged, and often silent, the release of two people operating under unbearable pressure. But Laila was deeply aware of her precarious position. She was the mistress of his truth, but the inhabitant of his gilded cage. The unseen threat. Laila's isolation was eventually broken, not by Julian, but by his enemies. Julian had warned her that his world was dangerous, but she hadn't understood the literal weight of that warning until a week before his formal engagement party. She was unpacking books she'd kept hidden from Julian, a small, stubborn attempt to maintain her former self, when she noticed a tiny, almost invisible scratch on the heavy wood of the doorframe. It was too low to be casual damage, placed near the lock. A cold dread washed over her. She used her phone's camera flash to examine it closely. It looked deliberate. When Julian arrived late that night, looking stressed and drinking heavily from the top-shelf whiskey he kept stocked for her, Laila waited until he had finished venting about a hostile takeover attempt. "Someone has been here," Laila stated, her voice quiet. Julian paused, the glass halfway to his lips. His mask snapped into place instantly. "What are you talking about?" She led him to the door and pointed out the minuscule scratch near the deadbolt. "It's a marker, a small incision. I think they were testing the lock's resistance, or possibly leaving a subtle sign for someone else." Julian examined it, his features turning to granite. He pulled out his own phone, sending a rapid, coded message that Laila could only assume was to his security team. "How long have you known?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. "I just saw it. I'm meticulous, Julian. I notice detail." He turned, the intensity of his gaze pinning her to the wall. "This isn't a game, Laila. This is why I wanted you to vanish. If my enemies know about you, if they suspect you are anything more than a fleeting distraction, they will use you to get to me." "And what would they suspect me of being?" Laila challenged, refusing to shrink back. "Your vulnerability? Your conscience?" "Worse," Julian spat. "They would suspect you are the leverage, the one thing I would sacrifice a deal for, the one thing I would bleed for." He grabbed her arms, not in anger, but in the terrifying reality of his fear. "They know the fiancé is untouchable, but you, Laila, you are a secret that can be broken." The engagement and the demand. The incident galvanized Julian. He doubled Laila's unseen security measures, and his visits became rushed, less about solace and more about ensuring her safety and maintaining his control. He was cold, distant, building his walls higher in preparation for the engagement party. The night of the party, Laila was alone in the apartment. The city hummed with the knowledge of Julian Thorne's official union. Laila tried to read, but the silence of the gilded cage pressed down on her. She knew Julian was at the grand ballroom, surrounded by press, wealth, and his contract fiancée, Anya. She got up, walking to the large window, feeling the familiar, aching isolation. Suddenly, her phone, the anonymous phone Julian had provided, rang. It was Julian. "Where are you?" His voice was tight, strained. The background was a cacophony of music and muted cheers. "I'm by the window," Laila whispered. "Congratulations, Mr. Thorne." "Stop it," he ordered, the sound of glass clinking somewhere in the background. "I can't breathe, Laila. This is a fortress of lies and smiles. I need you to be real for 1 minute." "I am real," Laila replied, her hand pressing against the cold glass. "And I'm standing here, alone, in the truth you created. Does the contract smile well?" A long, heavy silence. "She does," Julian finally said, the fatigue crushing his voice. She smiles perfectly, but it feels like death. He paused, and then the line went quiet, except for his ragged breath. I need you to do something, Julian demanded, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, desperate whisper. I need a distraction. Anya's father is cornering me about a prenup addendum I can't sign. I need 5 minutes, Laila. I need to know you are only mine. Laila frowned. What do you want me to do? I need you to send me a picture, Julian commanded. The request was shocking, a violation of their safety protocols. Right now, something only I will understand, something utterly, brutally real. I need the truth you offer, Laila, or I swear I'll walk out of this room and burn the entire deal down. Laila stared at the phone. He wasn't asking for a romantic gesture. He was asking for leverage, an emotional weapon to wield against his own obligations. He was asking her to place herself in extreme danger for his immediate relief. It wasn't about love, but control and survival. Laila walked slowly to the closet and pulled out the midnight blue jacket. She held it against her chest, feeling the warmth of its memory, the smell of him. She opened the phone camera. A close-up of her bare wrist, still faintly showing the fading bruise from the executive's grip, juxtaposed against the expensive, midnight blue silk of his jacket clutched tightly in her hand. The scar you caused, the protection you offered, a message of brutal intimacy and undeniable possession. Your truth. 2 minutes later, Julian's voice, sharp and restored, came through the phone. The room is mine again, he said, his control fully regained. The deal is secure. You are a dangerous, infuriating woman, Laila. And you are safe, Mr. Thorne, she replied, hanging up. She knew then the nature of her captivity. She was not a mistress. She was his hidden strength, the weapon he turned inward to survive his world. But in granting him that truth, she had risked everything, proving once and for all that she was willing to burn in his fire. The shadow of Anya. Julian's control returned fiercely after the engagement party, a control Laila recognized as both necessary and terrifying. The photograph, the stark, intimate proof of their arrangement, had served its purpose. It allowed Julian to navigate the subsequent business deals with the iron resolve needed to secure his empire, but it also left a trace. His visits became less frequent but more charged. He was restless, his eyes perpetually scanning the expensive apartment as if expecting the shadows to harbor assassins. He would press Laila for details about her day, not out of casual curiosity, but a need to verify her absolute isolation and safety. Laila knew the facade of Julian's life was taking its toll. He drank more, slept less, and the moments when his mask slipped, when he would simply collapse onto the sofa, needing her silent presence, were becoming more frequent. The external threat, however, was closing in with quiet, polished efficiency. Anya, Julian's fiancée, was not simply a political match. She was a predator trained in the same high-stakes environment. She understood transaction and control, and while she accepted Julian's inevitable coldness, she did not accept deviation. Anya began subtly disrupting Julian's routine, late-night calls under the pretense of wedding planning, unannounced visits to his main residence. Laila knew Julian's security could deflect physical intrusion, but not the pervasive suspicion of a shrewd mind. One evening, Julian arrived visibly agitated, tearing off his jacket and throwing his phone onto the couch. "The security breach," he said, running a hand over his tightly styled hair. It wasn't a marker, it was a digital trace. Laila, who had been waiting for him by the window, turned sharply. What did they find? Nothing direct, but an old email account of mine was accessed, one I haven't used in years. It's impossible to trace who, but the only person who would invest that kind of time into deep mining my digital past is someone who knows exactly where to look for weakness. Laila walked toward him, her intuition cold and sharp. It wasn't one of your corporate enemies, was it, Julian? He looked at her, his dark eyes betraying the truth he refused to speak. Anya is a thorn. She's been studying my family for a year. She knew where to look for the first lie I ever told. Anya wasn't interested in the business. She was interested in the truth Julian claimed to seek. She was testing the strength of his control by searching for the source of his weakness. She's looking for the distraction, Laila murmured, realizing the gravity of the situation. She's looking for the mistress. She's looking for leverage, Julian corrected, his voice harsh. If she finds you, she will use you to control me entirely, and if she can't control you, she will eliminate you. The test of loyalty. The danger intensified the next day. Julian, desperate to secure Laila's immediate financial future and create a paper trail that looks like a long-term, non-romantic investment, gave her a document, a legally binding agreement, and a significant offshore bank transfer. Sign this, Julian instructed, his tone devoid of warmth. It gives you security and distance. You will be free, financially, if anything happens to me, or if disarrangement ends. Laila looked at the document, a massive sum written in cold black ink. It was freedom, wrapped in an ultimatum. Is this your way of cutting the thread, Julian? This is my way of ensuring my most valuable asset, he countered, his words sharp with professional cruelty. I am protecting my investment in honesty. If you sign this, you secure yourself. If you refuse, you risk not only your life, but my entire empire, because I will not be compromised by sentiment. It was the ultimate test. Laila knew that taking the money would confirm her as a transactional player, a gold digger in Julian's eyes, and would justify his cynical view of the world. Refusing it meant rejecting the only concrete security she had, but validating her genuine connection to his vulnerable self. I won't sign it, Laila said quietly, pushing the document back across the glass table. Julian's expression hardened into fury. You defy me when I am trying to protect you? This is not courage, Laila. This is suicidal ego. No, this is the truth you claim to need, she insisted, her voice rising. If I take the money, I become a mistress, a contract, a lie you pay for. I won't be transactional. I am not Anya. I am here because you are lonely, Julian, not because you are rich. The sheer audacity of her refusal stripped the power from his command. He stared at her, the anger slowly draining away, replaced by a terrible, painful comprehension. You are impossible, he whispered, collapsing into the sofa, the control finally breaking. You are the only impossible thing in a world I have perfected. Laila walked over and sat beside him, placing a hand gently on his arm. She wasn't seeking intimacy, but connection. Then accept the impossibility, Julian, and stop trying to buy the truth you already have. The public exposure. Their moment of fragile connection was brutally interrupted. The security phone on the table began to buzz insistently. Julian snatched it up, listening, his face immediately going pale with cold dread. The front door of your building, he muttered to Laila, his eyes wide with a rare naked fear. Anya, she's here. She found the location. Laila's blood ran cold. The isolation had been breached. Julian sprang up, moving with military precision. She won't come alone. She will have media or security. She is here for maximum public impact. We have seconds. He grabbed Laila's arm, pulling her towards the back service elevator. We take the roof. My chopper is on standby 2 blocks away. Move. They burst through the service door and onto the rooftop access stairs. Julian shoved Laila ahead of him, his years of ruthless maneuvering now applied to the desperate defense of his secret. How did she find me? Laila demanded, scrambling up the steel steps. The scratch on the door, gasped, pushing a heavy security bar aside. It wasn't a marker. It was a listening device. She's been here, listening to every word, every confession, waiting for the perfect moment to destroy us both. They emerged onto the roof. The Manhattan skyline glittered, beautiful and lethal. The wind whipped Laila's hair across her face. Julian pulled her behind a utility shed. "She's bringing the fight out of the shadows, Laila," Julian ground out. "She wants to ruin me by exposing my weakness, and you are the weapon she will use." Suddenly, the stairwell door below them burst open. Anya appeared, stunningly dressed, flanked not by security, but by two men holding professional cameras, their lenses glinting. Anya walked onto the roof, her expensive shoes clicking on the gravel. Her smile was cold, victorious, and terrifying. "There you are, Julian," Anya's voice carried clearly in the wind. "And here is the truth. The one thing you claimed no one would betray you over. The service staff who gave you honesty. Did you truly think a 100 million prenup would protect you from your own heart, darling?" Julian Thorne, the ruthless heir, cornered on a rooftop with his secret working-class mistress. The danger was no longer corporate. It was immediate, personal, and potentially fatal to their public lives. The strategic defense. The wind howled across the rooftop, whipping Anya's designer dress and Julian's suit. The cameras were aimed, their lenses hungry for the image that would define the next decade of tabloid headlines and corporate scandal. Julian, however, was not paralyzed by fear. He was galvanized by calculation. Anya took a step closer, savoring the moment. "Such loyalty, Julian. You abandoned the Golden Skye to hide her in a hovel, and yet she's still clinging to you. Or perhaps she was just waiting for her payout." She directed a cutting smile at Laila. "The truth is ugly, isn't it, Miss Hassan? He pays for silence and honesty only when it suits him." Julian didn't look at Anya. His eyes were locked on Laila, a silent command passing between them. He raised his voice, loud enough to be captured by the hidden microphones the photographers surely carried. "Anya," Julian's voice was stone, projecting absolute, cold control. "Stop this farce. You've brought two journalists with you, not paparazzi. You're trying to create a narrative of a cheating fiancé to renegotiate the terms of our merger. You failed to understand that Laila is not a mistress." Anya scoffed. "Then what is she? Your therapy project?" "She is an employee of a shell company I use for discretion," Julian lied, his voice never wavering. "She was hired strictly for personal administrative duties, handling sensitive legal documents that required complete isolation and secrecy ahead of the merger. She is privy to my most sensitive financial details, including details that prove your family's firm is in breach of contract." His words, while cold, were aimed at the journalists, not Anya. They spoke of business, not betrayal, turning the scandalous image into a corporate espionage story. The journalists, trained to follow money, hesitated. Anya's triumphant look faltered. "You think they'll believe that lie, Julian?" "They'll believe the document I have filed with my lawyers," Julian countered, pulling out a burner phone and sending a rapid transmission. "A document that proves Miss Hassan is a legal administrator protected by multiple NDAs. Publish a picture of her as anything other than an employee, and you violate every privacy clause in the merger agreement. You ruin your father's deal, Anya, not mine." Laila's sacrifice. Anya was momentarily stunned. Julian's strategic defense was brilliant. He hadn't denied the intimacy, but he had legally neutered the scandal, turning Laila into untouchable corporate property. The paparazzi were now looking at each other, realizing their million-dollar scoop might actually be a liability. But the danger was far from over. Anya's eyes, burning with furious, cold hatred, shifted entirely to Laila. If she couldn't ruin Julian, she could still eliminate his vulnerability. Anya took a sharp step toward Laila, her face contorted. You pathetic, self-righteous girl. You think your honesty means anything? You just signed your life over to him as his puppet. As Anya lunged, Julian moved instantly, shoving Laila behind him, shielding her body with his own. But Laila, seeing the manic desperation in Anya's eyes, and knowing the one thing Julian refused to lose was his empire, made a choice. Laila grabbed Julian's arm and propelled herself out from behind him, stepping directly into the glare at the flashes. She didn't flinch. She faced the cameras, but her eyes were fixed on Julian. "Stop it." Laila's voice was clear, ringing with desperate finality, a sound that cut through the wind and the chaos. The cameras flashed, capturing her figure alone, exposed, bathed in harsh light. But her next words were directed at Julian, an ultimate act of selfless protection. Her genuine desperation, Mr. Thorne is protective of all his staff, especially those handling his family's private affairs. His relationship with Miss Anya is solid. This is a misunderstanding. Please leave us alone. She looked completely broken, pleading. It was the absolute opposite of the defiant woman who had first challenged him. It was the performance of a pathetic, frightened outsider who was caught in a moment of professional trespass. The journalists exchanged looks. This was not the confession they wanted. This was a broken employee protecting her powerful boss, reaffirming the stability of the merger. The image of the powerful man protecting his vulnerable employee was far less explosive than the image of the guilty man cheating. Anya stared, realizing Laila had just handed Julian the victory. She had sacrificed her own dignity and their secret to protect his control, the sacrifice of their truth to save his lie. The aftermath. Anya, defeated and exposed as a petty blackmailer, was pulled away by her own shaken entourage. The journalists quickly retreated, the lack of scandal rendering the pictures worthless. The rooftop went silent. The wind was the only sound. Laila slowly turned from the spotlit emptiness, her shoulders slumped, her strength momentarily gone. Julian walked toward her. He didn't touch her. His expression was a storm of awe, fury, and utter devastation. He had never seen anyone risk so much for him, without a contract, without a demand. "You sacrificed yourself," he stated, his voice barely a rasp. "I secured the empire," Laila replied, her voice empty. "That is what you needed. That is the only truth that matters to you." "You think that's all I needed?" Julian's voice cracked. He reached out and gently touched her cheek, his fingers trembling. "I needed you to hide. I needed you to be silent. You exposed yourself to the entire world to protect the lie I'm forced to live." "Because I won't let them break you, Julian," Laila whispered, her eyes finally filling with tears. "And if they break you, I lose the only impossible thing in my world." He pulled her against him, crushing her in an embrace that was desperate, possessive, and terrifyingly honest. He buried his face in her hair, the rigid control he maintained in public finally dissolving. "They will pay for this," he vowed, his voice dark with promise. "Every single one of them. You are safe now, Laila. You are mine, and nothing in my life, not Anya, not the merger, not the billions, will ever hurt you again." A lifetime in the shadows, guarding the truth of the most powerful man in Manhattan, bound not by money, but by an impossible, dangerous love. The danger was not over. It had merely shifted, becoming an internal war fought for the soul of Julian Thorne. The quiet retribution. The night Laila sacrificed her dignity on the rooftop marked the end of the fragile innocence that had clung to their arrangement. Julian Thorne became a man of cold, focused vengeance. He didn't speak of the incident again, but his actions reverberated through the upper echelons of Manhattan. Within 72 hours, the two journalists who had photographed Laila found themselves blacklisted, their careers incinerated by a series of perfectly timed, legitimate exposés on their past ethical breaches, orchestrated with chilling speed by Thorne's legal team. Anya's father received a notice of legal proceedings so complex and ruinous that the merger terms were immediately renegotiated, entirely in Julian's favor. Anya was defeated, humiliated, and formally reduced to a figurehead in a contractual marriage that would now be defined by Julian's absolute dominance. Laila remained in the expensive, isolated apartment. Julian ensured her every physical need was met, but the emotional distance returned, harder than before. He was no longer the man who sought honesty. He was the man who had been nearly destroyed by it, and who now needed absolute control to ensure his world and her safety remained intact. His visits became fewer, and when he did arrive, the atmosphere was thick with possessiveness. He would watch her, silent, his eyes intense, as if trying to memorize the fragile truth she represented before the next lie consumed him. One night, Laila sat on the sofa, a book forgotten in her lap. Julian sat opposite her, polishing an antique silver lighter, the flicker of the flame catching the cruel angles of his face. "The Golden Skye," Julian murmured, breaking a long silence. "I bought it." Laila looked at him, startled. "Why?" "It was compromised. Anya's initial breach came from an anonymous tip sourced from the staff. They gossiped about your connection to me. They created the instability." "And you punished the entire restaurant?" "I secured my property," Julian corrected, his voice flat. "It will be closed and renovated. The staff received substantial severance, but they will not work for me again. Especially not Miguel. His fear led to his weakness, and weakness breeds betrayal." Laila felt a profound chill. Julian hadn't secured her. He had eliminated the environment where she dared to be herself. The gilded cage had just had its locks welded shut. The final threat. The internal threat was subdued, but Julian knew the true danger lay in his past, the betrayals that had always haunted him and driven his coldness. He revealed the story in fragments, late one night when the pressure of his life became unbearable. "My family built this empire on blood and lies," Julian admitted, his eyes dark with old pain. "The man I buried, my father's advisor, he was involved in a long-standing conspiracy to bankrupt my family. He was supposed to be loyal. When he died, the conspiracy didn't end, it just lost its head." Laila realized the attack on the rooftop wasn't just about the fiancé. It was about exposing the Thorne Empire's vulnerability to external predators, enemies who saw Julian's obsession with a service girl as the ultimate weakness. A hostile bid for a cornerstone company crucial to his legacy. The attack was led by Marcus Vance, a rival heir who embodied the same ruthless ambition as Julian, but lacked his calculated restraint. Vance was known for not just winning, but destroying. Julian was preparing to leave the apartment for the final, decisive board meeting, the climax of the takeover battle. He was dressed impeccably, armed with legal brilliance, but utterly depleted emotionally. "If I lose this," Julian said, his eyes hard, "I lose everything. My name, my power, my ability to keep you safe." Laila walked toward him, placing her hands on his chest. "Then you must not lose." "I can't afford distraction," he warned, pulling her hands away. "I need to be the man they fear, the man who doesn't bleed." "Then be that man," Laila said, her voice strong. "But know that the man who sees the truth lives here, not in that boardroom." The reckoning. Julian left, the silence he left behind feeling like an immense, suffocating weight. Laila tried to distract herself, but the dread was a physical presence. She knew the boardroom battle was merely the legal front. Vance would use any means necessary to destabilize Julian. Hours later, the apartment alarm system, the one Julian had personally installed, screamed to life. The security phone on the table flashed red. Intruder alert. Laila froze. Julian's security detail was nowhere near, likely preoccupied with protecting his public movements. She was exposed. The heavy, steel-reinforced door shuddered as a massive blow hit it, attacking Julian's vulnerability directly. The door buckled. Laila snatched the only weapon she could find, a heavy crystal decanter of Julian's expensive whiskey. The door splintered inward. Vance stood in the ruined doorway, flanked by two imposing security men. He was impeccably dressed, a cruel, triumphant smile on his face. Julian's little secret, Vance sneered, stepping into the living room. He spent billions defending a merger, but he forgot to defend the one thing he actually cares about. You are the weakness, Miss Hassan, and I am here to expose him utterly. Vance's men advanced on Laila. She stood her ground, the decanter raised. You're wrong, Laila said, her voice trembling but steady. He doesn't care about me. He only cares about control. A beautiful lie, Vance chuckled, but it won't save you. Suddenly, the service elevator dinged sharply. The apartment door, which led directly into the kitchen, burst open. Julian Thorne stood there. He was disheveled, his expensive tie loosened, a smear of dirt on his cheek. He hadn't won the battle yet, but he had left the boardroom mid-climax. Get away from her, Vance. Julian's voice was lethal, cold, the sound of the predator unleashed. Vance smiled, delighted by the confirmation. You left the closing argument, Julian, for a maid? My victory is already sealed. The deal is closed, Julian stated, his eyes fixed on Laila. But this is personal. You came into my home. You threatened my property. Your property? Vance scoffed. You treat her like a prize. You don't love her, Julian. You own her. Julian didn't look at Vance. He looked only at Laila, at her terrified, resolute face gripping the decanter. In that moment of absolute danger, the final thread of his control broke. No, Julian said, his voice raw, an ultimate, desperate confession. I don't own her. I need her, and that makes me weak. But you, Vance, you are about to find out what happens when you threaten the one thing I cannot live without. Ignoring his own security, Julian moved. He didn't engage with the gunman. He moved with brutal efficiency, tackling Vance and sending them both crashing to the floor, the sound of splintering glass and wood echoing through the isolated apartment. The fight was savage, fueled not by corporate greed, but by the primal, dark rage of a man protecting the one light he had allowed into his carefully constructed prison. The danger was no longer external. It was consuming Julian entirely. Laila watched, realizing that in saving her, he was finally becoming the monster he had always feared he was. The cost of need. The fight was a blur of expensive fabric, desperate grappling, and brutal, unschooled violence. Julian, stripped of his boardroom composure, was pure adrenaline and rage. He pinned Vance to the floor, raining blows down with the pent-up fury of a lifetime of betrayal and repressed emotion. Vance's security guards, momentarily stunned by the CEO's sudden, reckless aggression, finally moved. Laila reacted instantly. She hurled the crystal decanter, not at Vance, but at the light switch, plunging the living room into near darkness. The sudden shift broke the guard's focus. Laila used the distraction to tackle one guard, grabbing the fallen decanter and striking the guard's knee. The man roared in pain. Julian's security detail, alerted to the crisis by the system breach, were now sprinting up the service stairs. In the brief, terrifying chaos, Julian ended the fight with ruthless efficiency. A final, sickening blow rendered Vance unconscious. Julian immediately rose, breathing heavily, his hands scraped and bloody, his eyes blazing with a dangerous, primal intensity. He didn't look at the guards, who were now struggling against his incoming security team. He looked only at Laila, who stood amidst the wreckage, trembling, the shards of crystal around her feet. "Laila," he rasped, his voice thick with raw emotion and exhaustion, "are you hurt?" "No," she whispered, clutching her side. "I'm fine, but you left a meeting." "I won the meeting," Julian corrected, the cold strategist instantly resurfacing, even as blood dripped from his knuckles. Vance's disappearance from the boardroom mid-vote caused a panic and invalidated his own proxy votes. "The deal is mine. My lawyers are securing the premises now. Control first, safety second." But the act of leaving the boardroom for her, risking billions for a single life, spoke the truth louder than his business jargon. He walked to her, ignoring the chaos and his arriving security. He gently took her face in his scraped hands, his thumb brushing away a stray tear. "You didn't run," he murmured, the words heavy with disbelief and gratitude. "You stayed. You fought for me." "You are impossible to abandon," Laila replied, her voice thick with the complexity of her feelings, "even when you try to buy me away." The final vow. A pledge made not with lawyers, but with violence and desperate need. "This ends now," Julian stated, his voice a low, fierce vow. "The shadows, the secrets, the gilded cage. I am tired of living half a life to satisfy people who would burn me alive." He stepped back, looking at the wreckage of the beautiful, minimalist apartment. "This place is ruined. The Silver Crane is closed. My public life is contaminated. I will not allow you to be a secret anymore, Laila. I will not make you pay for my cowardice." The final vow, a pledge made not with lawyers, but with violence and desperate need. "This ends now," Julian stated, his voice a low, fierce vow. "The shadows, the secrets, the gilded cage. I am tired of living half a life to satisfy people who would burn me alive." He stepped back, looking at the wreckage of the beautiful, minimalist apartment. "This place is ruined. The Silver Crane is closed. My public life is contaminated. I will not allow you to be a secret anymore, Laila. I will not make you pay for my cowardice." Laila looked at him, recognizing the moment of total, terrifying surrender. He wasn't proposing marriage. He was proposing a new, dangerous reality. "What are you saying, Julian?" "I am saying I am resigning from the Thorne Group's board," Julian announced, the decision clearly final. "I have secured the primary assets and I have liquidated enough capital to walk away. The throne is not worth the price of your truth." The shock was absolute. Julian Thorne, the ruthless heir, was abandoning the source of his power and his entire identity. "But your control, your empire." "My control failed," Julian admitted, a flicker of pain crossing his face. "It left you exposed. I need a new world, a world built on my terms, not my father's lies. A world where I can look at you in the daylight and not worry if the camera is watching." He took her hand, his own calloused and bruised. "We leave New York. I will rebuild, not an empire of property and fear, but a life where you are my partner, my conscience, my undeniable truth. We will be hunted, Laila. Vance will seek revenge. Anya will try to destroy my reputation. But we will be together, and we will be honest. Not a fairy tale, but a shared exile. A powerful man choosing a dangerous, complex, truthful future over a comfortable, powerful lie. Dawn over a new horizon. Hours later, as dawn began to streak the Manhattan skyline with cold light, Laila and Julian were gone. Julian Thorne, stepping down due to unforeseen circumstances, taking only his most trusted administrative assets, including the recently hired Laila Hassan. Laila wore the midnight blue jacket. It no longer felt like a prison uniform or a piece of armor, but a symbol of the shared burden they had chosen. They were on a private jet, soaring east, away from the glittering, treacherous lights of the city that had bound them. Laila looked at Julian. He was cleaned up, but the exhaustion was profound. He reached across the seat and took her hand. His grip was less about control and more about absolute grounding. "Where are we going?" Laila asked, looking out at the rising sun. Julian smiled, a tired, genuine, and devastatingly handsome smile. "Somewhere quiet. Somewhere they can't find us easily. Somewhere I can teach myself to live without the armor." He leaned closer, his voice low and possessive, still laced with the shadow of the man he was. "I don't know how to love, Laila, but I know I can't live without your truth. And I will protect you from everything, including the worst parts of myself." Laila squeezed his hand, accepting the danger and the dark promise. She had faced the beast and chosen to walk with him into the wild. Their complex, forbidden bond had shattered an empire, and now they would rebuild their lives in the shadows, two souls defined by the impossible courage it took to choose honesty over power. The end. The Golden Skye stood silent, its chandeliers dark, its tables draped in shadow. The great windows reflected only the indifferent glitter of the city they had abandoned. The restaurant, once the stage for their volatile power dynamic, was now an empty monument to the empire Julian Thorne had secured and then cast aside. Julian Thorne was gone, not vanquished, but vanished, a strategic retreat from a life built on betrayal. He hadn't sought salvation, he had sought the truth, and he found it not in billions, but in the unwavering gaze of Laila Hassan. They found their new existence on the far side of the world, a landscape of quiet, unfamiliar horizons. They lived in seclusion, constantly vigilant, always aware that their honesty was a liability, and that Anya and Vance would perpetually hunt the man who chose heart over legacy. Laila was no longer confined to a gilded cage. She was bound by choice to the complexity of the man she loved. She shared his dark past, his constant fear of betrayal, and the profound, isolating burden of his power. Their relationship was not softened by exile. It remained intense, demanding, and utterly real. Julian never stopped being the man of control, but now that control was primarily dedicated to protecting her and maintaining the fragile, precious space where he allowed himself to be vulnerable. He often watched her, sometimes with awe, sometimes with the lingering possessiveness of the heir, but always with the profound gratitude of a man who had been offered light in his lifelong darkness. She never stopped being his conscience, the quiet fire that reminded him that the heart, not the balance sheet, defined his true worth. They had traded a powerful lie for a dangerous truth. They were hunted, exiled, and constantly tested by the outside world. But in the quiet vigilance of their new life, two souls who had first met in a crucible of cruelty found an unbreakable bond. A love forged in the shadows of Seoul and Manhattan, defined by courage and secured by the single, dangerous decision not to bow. The truth had set them free, but it demanded they remain vigilant forever.